Okay, so today we're going to be learning how to factor a quadratic, specifically in the case when a is equal to 1. And something I want you guys to consider as we're going through this is how are factoring and foiling connected? Okay, so here we have the quadratic ax squared plus bx plus c. This is in standard form, so let's make a note. Standard form. Okay, which just means, remember from before, that means it's from biggest exponent to smallest exponent. Our goal is to write this in factored form. Factored form is when you have x plus a number times x plus a number. So when we went going back to foiling, it's pre-foiling, okay? We're going to do this using big X. So you'll notice that I have big X right here. I have a times c on top and b. Those all come from the coefficients of the quadratic. When we're doing this, our first step is going to be write the equation in standard form, which means I want to write it so it's ax squared plus bx plus c. If it's not in standard form, I actually can't factor it yet. Okay? Once you have it in standard form, you're going to find the products of a and c. So because a is 1, a times c is really just equal to c. Right? Because 1 times c is c. So really, we're just going to put c here on top. But remember, it's a times c. Then you're going to set up big X. So put that number up here, put b under here, and then we're going to find the factors. Now, when we're finding the factors, we've done some practice with this. That means that we're trying to find out what numbers multiply to the top part, but also add to b. Okay, and then once I have those two numbers, those are my factors. And then we write our answer in factored form. So it's x plus our first number times x plus our second number, and then we're going to set it equal to 0. Okay, so here we're going to write each in factored form. So I have x squared plus 19x plus 90. Again, we've already done some practice with this big X, so let's practice putting it into setting up the big X and also using it to solve things. So first step is 1 times 90. Remember, step 1 is figuring out what the product of 1 times 90 is. I'm sorry, it's blurring a little bit. It's tracking my hand. So product of 1 times 90 is just equal to 90. So at the top of my big X, I'm going to put the value of 90. Underneath that, I'm going to put 19. 19 is my b value. It's the number in the middle. So 19 goes there. All right, and then remember, I'm trying to find out what two numbers multiply to 90 but add to 19. So how we're going to do this is we're going to start by listing the products of 90. So I'm going to start with 1 and 90. 1 times 90 is 90, but 1 plus 90 is not 19. So then I go 2. 2 times 45. 2 times 45 is 90, but 2 plus 45 is not 19. It's 47. So then I do 3 times 30. 3 times 30 is 90. 3 plus 30 is not 19. It's 33. So then I can keep going on, right? I can try all these numbers. I'm going to go skip down to 9 because, again, I know 9 times 10 is 90. But 9 plus 10 is 19. So those are actually going to be the factors of choice. Notice that I'm keeping the smallest number on the left and the biggest number on the right. We do this to kind of keep our numbers organized, okay? Because 9 times 10 is the same thing as 10 times 9. So those are my factors, 9 and 10. 9 times 10 is 90. 9 plus 10 is 19, so that works. So then I just got to write it in factored form. Factored form means I'm going to have x plus 9 times x plus 10 equals 0. Okay, and this should be my answer. Okay, if I think back to the essential question, it asked how are factoring and foiling connected? Well, if x plus 9 times x plus 10 equals 0, then if I were to FOIL this, I should get x squared plus 19x plus 90. So we're going to use this to check our work. So I have x plus 9 times x plus 10. I'm going to do this first problem using standard method. So x times x gives me x squared. X times 10 is 10x. 9 times x is 9x. 9 times 10 is 90. And then if I do check, I get x squared plus 19x plus 90, which is the exact same problem that I started out with. Okay, so that means that I did it correctly. So again, how are factoring and foiling connected? Well, we can use foiling to check factoring, and actually we can use factoring to check foiling. So let's go over here. I have x squared plus x minus 30. We're going to move on to this next problem. So some of you are really good at multiplication, but some of you might need to be using either a multiplication table or you're going to have to list the factors. Either way, no problem. Sometimes I have to list the factors as well, just because I forget about the silly ones. So let's start out with multiplying a times c. That was our first step. So 1 times negative 30. And at this point, you probably can do it in your head, hopefully. But you should understand that negative 30 is the number that I'm going to put on top, which happens to be my c value in this case. And it's going to be actually always the case for when a is equal to 1. And then x, there is nothing with x, so I'm going to put 1 here. Because remember, technically, this is a 1x. So I'm trying to find two numbers that multiply to negative 30 and add to 1. Now, there's going to be a little bit of cheat sheet, and let's write it over here. Let's actually write it over here. Let's write some cheat codes. Okay, so if I have a positive b and a positive c, positive, positive, then my answer, when I factor it, is going to be also a positive, positive. Okay, so that means that I'm going to have, so if b is positive and c is positive like it was here, then when I go to factor it, I'm going to have a positive 9 and a positive 10, right? So the one we're looking at right now is, here, when b is positive, but c is negative. So what I'm trying to think of is, I'm trying to find out what two numbers multiply to a negative number but make a positive number. So remember, we're always doing it from smallest number to biggest number. So I'm going to try, well, let's start with the first factor. I know that 1 times 30 equals 30, right? Now, in order for it to be negative 30, one of these has to be positive and one of them has to be negative. If I make the 30 negative, then 1 plus negative 30 is negative 29. And remember, I need it to be a positive number. So I'm actually going to make this negative 1 and keep the 30 positive. So it's going to go from a positive negative to a negative positive, okay? So smallest factor to biggest factor. So then here, let's try the next one, negative 2 and positive 15. Again, I know it's not going to be 2 and negative 15 because that would give me a negative number, and I have a positive here. Negative 2 plus 15 is 13, so still not it. So then let's try negative 3 and positive 10. That's going to give me 7, so we're getting closer. So then finally I'm going to do negative 5 and positive 6. And ding, 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 that is going to multiply to 30, negative 30, and add to positive 1. So negative 5, positive 6. So my factors are going to be x minus 5 and x plus 6. And that is equal to 0. And again, it's minus 5 because I had negative 5 here, and it's plus 6 because I had positive 6 here. We are going to check our work because we cool like that. So x minus 5 times x plus 6 equal to 0. Remember, I'm just checking to see if my distributive property works. I'm going to get x squared. I'm going to get plus 6x minus 5x minus 30. So then I'm going to have x squared plus x minus 30, which is what we started out with. Okay. All right, last example. We have x squared minus 6x equals 16. Sorry, so x squared minus 6x equals 16. So what we need to do first is get in standard form. So remember, standard form has biggest exponents to smallest exponent. So I do have the x squared minus 6x, but I also need to have it equal to 0. So to get it to equal to 0, I'm going to actually subtract 16 from both sides. So the new equation that I'm working with is going to be x squared minus 6x minus 16 equals 0. And this is the equation I'm going to factor. So what's 1 times negative 16? That's going to give me negative 16. So that's going on top. And then underneath, I'm going to have negative 6. All right, so this is a different rule because now I have a negative and a negative. So I know that in order to get a negative number, I have to have a negative number and a positive number, right? So here, the negative and the positive, this is what gave me the positive underneath, right? But now I'm trying to get the negative underneath. So a negative times a negative and a negative is going to be, your answer, is going to be a positive number and a negative number, okay? That's how we're going to get it. So what that means in this case is my factors are going to be positive 1 and negative 16. And look, 1 minus 16 is negative 15, so we're in the negative zone, which is what we want. So now let's try 2. 2 and 8. Negative 8 specifically. And 2 times negative 8 is negative 16, and 2 minus 8 is negative 6. And we do not need to go any further because those are the factors. So we're going to have x plus 2 and x minus 8 equals 0. Again, you can check your work, but I kind of deleted the space that we needed to check our work. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to finish our cheat codes because we have positive, 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 negative, negative, negative. We also need to have negative, positive, right? So thinking about all the different combinations we could have. So what happens if I have a negative and a positive? Well, let's go ahead and should we add an example? We're not going to have a space to add an example. So trying to thinking of it this way, if I have a negative here, we need it to multiply to a negative, but add to a positive. Actually, sorry, other way around. Multiply to a positive, add to a negative. That means I would have to have 2 negative numbers, right? In order for it to multiply to a positive. But in order for it to be a negative solution, then that means both of my answers are going to be negative, negative. Because that's the only way I can get to the positive answer. It's negative, negative. Okay. And then finally, the last cheat code of the day. Actually, I think that is the last cheat code of the day. That is the last cheat code of the day. So those are all of our cheat codes, okay? Again, if you memorize this, great. Some of you don't need to memorize it, but some of you, it is going to be a good thing to reference. Okay? And that is it for today.